So when you think of the word reconstruct, you think of the verb, the process of building and to build again. But when you think of it again as a construct, reconstruct, it's actually referring to things like race and class and other social constructs. Constructs are ways of examining the development of jointly constructed understandings of the world that form the basis for shared assumptions about reality. So what is that? It's a vacant lot from June of 2019. But one of the first questions that comes to mind is, how long has that been empty? How long has it been vacant? Using Google Street View, the earliest view that we can find is from 2011, but it's still vacant. So more questions for him. When you go around the corner or go around the block and face a different direction, from 2007, you still see that it's vacant. But from this particular view, you get another shape of perception forming in the mind. Where is it now? It's associated with a poor neighborhood, probably on a disinvested area. So from the conscious level, there is one type of reading of a site, but on the subconscious level, there is a negative perception shaping and forming. So a continued analysis of the area uncovers more housing of various shapes of instability, stages of instability. And when you put this in the greater context of the south side of Chicago and all of the crime and vacancy and demolition that is perpetuated in the media, the term that comes to mind is blight. Now, blight is one of those terms that also carries a range of connotations. It's most associated with the concept of urban blight, but it's actually from botany and agriculture, and it's a term referring to the death and decay of a crop so that it no longer sustains life. So when you return back to that image with those connotations and perceptions, now it's becoming a blighted property. So in a traditional way, using tools to delimit space, we tend to draw boundaries and try to eliminate variables, looking at rationality, some form of legibility. And as you draw, we try to figure out what's the ownership. What are the parcels? So in this case, city-owned parcels, absentee-owned parcels, but a deeper read out of 174 parcels in the surrounding area, 79% are vacant, 58% owned by the city, 24% owned by absentee, and only 9% by homeowners. So when you look at zoning and land use, more questions arise. Commercial, residential, manufacturing, from when, from what era, from what decade? Which is interesting. When you actually do a deep dive and look at the sandbar maps, in the same area that's highlighted in yellow, it wasn't always like that. It used to be densely populated with neighborhoods, it's a neighborhood, houses. But then after the Great Depression, when we tried to figure out how to control and return for our investments, the Federal Housing Authority issued this document, the Underwriting Manual, 1936, that had a series of racial restrictive covenants in it that explicitly said a change in social or racial occupancy generally leads to instability and a reduction of values. So by 1949, when a reconversion housing project, I don't know what that is, I've never found a historian who understands what a reconversion housing project is, was introduced into the same neighborhood for coloreds, something after World War II. And then there was a series of redlining that demarcated the areas as a hazard because of its 100% occupancy of Negroes. Fast forward to 2012, you have a series of empty lots. It's been hollowed out with mysterious ways of trying to put values in dollar forms on the land. So what is the value? Is it a reductive way of looking at how much money you can get back, or is it an actual value of principle of productive use of the land, use of fruct, useful and fruitful production of land? So when you look at redlining, it is undeniable about the history of segregation, particularly in the city of Chicago, but people forget Between 1950 and 1960, $3.2 billion was extracted from the black community in Chicago alone. But beyond the dollar figure, there's a root shock. There's something that lasts for much, much, much longer, for generations, if the patterns of disinvestment and the same patterns are perpetuated. So when you go back to this lot, June of 2019, what's interesting is that you don't see the touch of humanity. So my organization, I co-founded the organization a decade ago. In 2014, we entered into the area with the tagline of "There Grows the Neighborhood." We focus on a concept of regenerative neighborhood development, which is focusing on safe, intergenerational, and healthy community spaces. We operate, we proudly say, in the third sector where things get done. Right? In between the public and private sectors, we are constantly translating and negotiating in the social economy and have a really messy root system of all types of doing and action that blends art, architecture, aquaponics, planning, carpentry. So take, for example, this same house, this kitty corner from that same lot that we've been looking at. That was a foreclosed house that was put on the market for $460,000 in 2007 during the bubble burst. Fast forward 3 years, now we have a mural, a garden, a safe space, a public designed space to engage anyone to come up and show. Beyond a space of inclusion, it is a space of intention. So that's school. That is now a community school programming where kids show up to do science in the garden. But it's an intergenerational space where people and elders come in and get food. It's open to the public. There are no fences. You can engage, and any day it becomes a space of play and freedom and just safety, where you can actually engage. What is this? It's a cucumber. Lemon cucumber? I didn't know that there's such things existed, right? Fresh fruits and vegetables, farmers markets, re-imaging what is the negative perception of the South Side of Chicago. But the best part is the ecology of the place starts to transform. And now all of a sudden you have bees, butterflies, grasshoppers, all types of ecosystems flourishing. And while we have a farm, it's not about the farm, it's about the people. It's about the people making the place. So all types of people come in and then transform every space in the house into a classroom. Various forms of culture come up. That's Mama Betty. Mama Betty's an anchor for root and wisdom. But cooking is a class of art and science and food. Engaging people from outside the community, every space becomes a way of trying to rethink art and imagination and using nature as a guide. Printing t-shirts inspired by the designs that we see in nature, claiming spaces for anybody to be able to come in and use music and art and cooking and food. It all comes back to we all gotta eat. So the farm-to-table experience humanizes the spaces, but we have a little twist. We have an urban ecology apprenticeship program that does include the gardening, farming, and the carpentry. So that greenhouse that people would typically think is a greenhouse is actually a wood shop. So all of the reclaimed wood that comes back in, we clean it up. We train the process of how do you get the right measurements, sanding, prep, and then we have schematic designs for a crate that becomes a crate, go figure. Right? Deconstructing crates to become a lesson plan for our apprentices. Reclaiming the spaces in order for each one to teach 5. Public workshops for the community to make products, and you work and you shop. Get it? Work, shop. So every space that becomes radically transformed, radical meaning of or restoring to the root, where we conceptualize in 2D, in 3D, in physical form, mentorships happening, physical space being reclaimed back, private space, empty spaces becoming rendered public. So in the same space, when you do have an abundance of products and your skill set gets more refined, the human infrastructure builds, then you have more lesson plans. You have more teachers, you have more mentors. You learn how to draw, learn how to express concepts that become iterative in places. Now, next thing you know, we designed a barn. First timber frame barn in the city of Chicago since the fire that we have as a pavilion. for people to meet and share and play, claim the streets back. Come for a tour, stay for 4 hours, get to work. Public cultural expressions, memories of what we've forgotten. Music that transforms a space, dancing, farm to table, sunflowers. You think you know how you're planting a sunflower, but then the squirrels and the birds do all the rest. So that's what happens. But it becomes a dream space, an interstitial space of liminality, dreaming. So now that barn, when it gets cold, it becomes another object with the polycarbonate and the materials from the space. It's a structural object of beauty, but things happen inside. Community sing projects, yoga, dancing, farm to table, all year round. That's wood. Puppet show. A space that democratizes publics and allows us to dream. And we take our lessons from the sunflowers, where every pattern is a seed for regeneration. So when we pivot and look back at that same vacant, empty parcel that's been empty for 20 years, what is missed is the spaces of humanity, and 90% of the area is run by us. We get to work, mowing, but tired of mowing. Why not design? Let's build something. So we started partnering with the Trillium Dell, one of the woodworking guilds we worked with, to think about a timber frame structure as a modular pavilion installation on that same site, directly facing the barn, activating the site as a public pavilion, hand-raising it together, programming it together. It's a modular design that moves. Just what happens with the parcel? Why is it, if you have 5 parcels, is it just going to be one house? Is it a tiny house? Is it an art loft? Is it a market? What is it? Dreaming together. And then we got featured in the Architecture Biennial. So we moved we deconstructed it, relocated it back downtown, and the public responded, said, "Where's our space?" So we got to work and built another one. So we had to shift the design, not of larger timber frames, but more of a modular system of reclaimed wood with shosugiban and charred wood, shifting the aesthetic, making it accessible, appreciating the labor, and ultimately changing the space as another form of legibility. This is iteration 2. We paused for a moment for a memorial for one of the people in our network that we lost, and then got back to work. The heuristic and iterative forms of this heuristic that didn't transform the space through this legibility of hands working together in public, in common. So we have active processes of commoning that allows us to see and read spaces differently. This is now activated as a greenhouse, but by the spring it's going to open back up. It'll become something else. What it is actively reintroducing the concept of housing back again. So we're looking at the worker cottages, which was one of the first affordable housing in the city of Chicago, with other forms of iterative designs that then claim all of the spaces back to become public space, to be a place that we call the Commonwealth. So over the next several years, we're looking at building housing. And it's how we rethink, shape the structures of our consciousness through see, touch, taste, hear, and smell. Far too often, the legibility is maps are rendered by people that are not in tune and touch with what's happening on the ground. The abstract concept of a spatial design is rendered by an architect that might not have a conversation with the community who's the actual expert. So it's a negotiation of this. This is one of my favorite quotes from Frederick Douglass. It is the picture of life contrasted with the fact of life, the ideal contrasted with the real, which makes criticism possible. Where there is no criticism, there is no progress. There grows a neighborhood.